Welcome to this latest edition of the First Voice Podcast, brought to you by First Voice magazine, the official flagship magazine of the Federation of Small Businesses, and the go-to podcast for news, tips, and important information for small businesses and the self-employed. In this episode, we will be discussing the benefits of networking groups, as well as ways you can obtain services you might need to grow your small business by exchanging skills rather than paying for them. Running a small business is tough and can at times feel isolating. What's more, finding money to invest in growing or evolving your business, from web design to legal advice, consulting services, and content creation, can be an unwelcome additional expense. However, there are a growing number of small business networking hubs and forums that enable small business owners and sole traders to obtain support, share ideas, and swap strategies, and a number of other sites that allow small business owners and entrepreneurs to exchange skills and resources, all of which provide opportunities to professionalize, develop, and grow. In this episode, I'm joined by two guests to discuss the benefits of joining networks and paying it forward, as it were, when it comes to skills. They are Kelly Baines, who founded the Nurture Network for Entrepreneurial Women in Business, and Rupert Lane, founder of Provo, a platform through which small businesses and the self-employed can swap skills and services with one another. Thanks for joining us today. Kelly, I'll kick off with you, if I may. Give us a quick overview, if you will, of Nurture Network and exactly what it does.
Sure. Hi, John. Yeah, thanks so much for having me today. I'm really delighted to be here and excited for today's discussion. So in my day job, I'm the co-founder of a content consultancy, Lemon Quarters, and we focus mainly on helping sort of tech and financial services brands really have conversations on the things that matter to the people that matter most to them, so really their clients. And, you know, in that background, we have lots and lots of conversations with founders and business leaders about their working lives and how much they missed interacting with peers and sharing experiences and meeting new people. So myself and my co-founder, Mary Claire, we were inspired to set up Nurture Network probably about 6 months ago now, so autumn 2021. And Nurture Network, it's an online networking hub for women in business, regardless of their age, the sector that they work in, the job role, or their location within the UK. And what we wanted to do was bring together women just to share their experiences, to mentor informally and learn from each other. So participants will sort of meet through a series of online and, you know, hopefully in the future offline roundtable events. They're closed events, so we usually have about eight people or so, completely off the record and very free-flowing conversations. And we also create some sort of supporting content and other online resources really designed to help just to inform, inspire, entertain. We run in a podcast series and we interview members on their career journey, their standout moments, their words of advice. So we've just over 500 women in the network now, and we've just been really amazed at how quickly it's grown and, you know, how much the events and the content have sort of touched and resonated with people. I think it shows that there's a sort of a real a demand and interest for sort of more informal ways for people to get together. And, you know, we're obviously both, you know, completely delighted at these first steps. And we're now sort of on the second stage, and we're speaking with some fab companies about partnering with Nurture Network and, you know, how we can support their sort of employer brand and highlight their support for more diversity and representation. So really the aim of Nurture Network is to help get more women in business a seat at the table.
Yeah, that's great. And, you know, that demand that you touched upon there is reflected in the fact that there's all sorts of networking groups now, and they seem to be gathering even more momentum. Why is that? What is the value that they add to members?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think principally, really, we're just a social people, and, you know, we've been 2+ years of working from home. And I think that's really sort of, you know, brought that to the forefront, the lack of opportunities for people from, you know, different walks of life to meet and share experiences, you know, that classic water cooler moment of, you know, conversations that aren't necessarily 100% work related, but are professional in nature. And I think particularly for small businesses and entrepreneurs, you know, it can be a lonely place. And I think having a network or a tribe where you can share your experiences, you know, get advice and simply be heard, it's a powerful thing. And the way that we work is changing. And I think at the sort of the increase in networking groups and having a greater focus on building and being part of a community as a response to that change. You asked about the value that networking groups can add to their members. I mean, we ask all of our members their feedback, and I think the most common response we get is around the idea that our events are sort of a safe space where people can be sort of open and give them the ability to talk openly about pressing issues with other like-minded women. And first we want to celebrate and promote the fantastic women that often are overlooked in business and entrepreneurship, and we want to provide a platform and give voice to share their stories. So I think it's those values of sort of finding your own people is really what sort of leads to, I suppose, the increase in networking groups.
Yeah, and you touched on the COVID period that we've been through, and that period where people couldn't quite have that face-to-face connectivity. Has that made these types of networking groups all the more important as people have been seeking, support and guidance and advice from their peers?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that's definitely the response that we get. I think we're still we're slowly getting back to the office, but it's certainly still not full time, and it's still. I think that the sort of the way the world has changed is definitely still with this. So I think COVID has sort of thrown into relief the need for sort of meeting people across different with different experiences and sort of sharing that experience, definitely.
And you also mentioned, Kelly, that your group is for women from all backgrounds. But amid this sort of growing awareness around the importance of equality and equal opportunities, just how important are networks like Nurture Network to give in specific groups the support they need to succeed, and just how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was really important that we wanted to create a space that was open to all women, regardless of their background and location, and that all of the networking and contact aspects that we do were free of charge. We know there's loads of networks, there's loads of groups that maybe might be limited to a particular type of profile, the similar job level or similar location, and a lot of times these are paid for, which we sort of felt that there was space for another network that was sort of the opposite of that, and it wasn't excluding sort of the very people that might most benefit from networking. We're a network run by women for women, and it's really great to see how our members are able to support and lift each other. And as I said before, I think particularly for entrepreneurs, it's just really important to have that sense that you're not alone, and that there's others who can relate to your experiences and share perspectives and advice. And we know that men and women in particular network differently. There's been plenty of studies. So there was one from the National Academy of Science that found that men benefit most from sort of building quite broad networks, but more successful women have a broad network, but also a smaller inner network of women that they're close with. So we know that there's a need for sort of women's networks that are crucial for equality, because they provide that close connection to other women who might encounter sort of similar struggles, while they're still diverse enough for personal and professional growth. And also, I mean, there's plenty of stats. I'm sure all of our listeners will know them well around the skills gap and the lack of diversity and inclusivity, particularly within entrepreneurship. 17% of business owners are women, but female founders raised only 3% of VC funding in last year in 2021. And, Black female entrepreneurships got even less. They got 0.2% of funding. So, we know the support and space is needed to help women and other groups, and in particular female entrepreneurs, succeed and to inspire and also be inspired.
Yeah, great. And you've touched on some of the obvious benefits, around sort of support and network and so on. If I'm a female small business owner and I'm thinking of joining a group like yours, how's it going to support me on a practical level? What sort of things might I take away at a practical level that are going to help me with my business?
Yeah, no, good question. I think the power of sort of informal networking is that, people get to be, our members in particular have been super candid and, shared so much of who they are and themselves and their experiences. We've had things like job offers, really tailored business advice, business deals. We've had some tears. We've had a lot of laughter during our events as well. And the members are able to bounce ideas off each other and know that, we don't record these events and everything that's said in them is said in confidence. I think, without giving too much information away, we had a recent event where one of our members was explaining a challenge that she was having with some stakeholders at a company. And she was wondering whether whether she should or could confront them around some everyday sexism that she was experiencing. And the participants around the table, they all had really different takes and really different experiences and ideas as to what she could or should do. And which they were happy to share, and it made for a really rich and nuanced discussion around a topic that is quite sensitive. And I think that bouncing of ideas, it's only really possible when you're in a room with like-minded people, and whose only sort of agenda is really to help and share. We know that people have quite limited time in the calendar for career development, so I think making those genuine connections with people who are of a like-minded and similar experiences sort of really kind of helps to fast track that.
Yeah, great. And just finally on networking, Kelly, we mentioned at the top that there's a lot more of these kind of networks sprouting now. If I'm a small business owner or an entrepreneur, I want to go about sort of finding the right one for me. Are there things that I should consider or things that I can do in advance of joining that'll help me get the most out of them, perhaps?
Yeah, I think great question. And I think that one it's probably really unique to each business owner's situation. Some general tips and ideas, I think, first sort of start off by looking at, what's missing in your business or your own personal development. Is it making a connection? Is it to learn new things? Is it to meet new people? And then I think on the flip side, think about, the time and the cost commitment. So a network like ours is low time, no cost, which is great, to build up connections and meet women across, in our case, different levels of seniority and experience. And then there's many, many other networking groups that might focus more on learning and business growth, and they may have a higher cost and a higher time commitment. So it's sort of about addressing, I guess, internally first where you get the most benefit from, and word of mouth is always a great way to find your tribe and those people that will lift you up. So as colleagues, partners, social media. I love a good Facebook group, and there's a Facebook group for everything now. And hey, if you don't find one that suits, maybe just even consider creating your own one.
That's a brilliant message. Thanks, Kelly. That's really, really interesting. Rupert, I'll come across to you if I may. A big part of networks is sharing ideas, or a big part of networking is sharing ideas and making connections. Provo's a slightly different type of site, isn't it? Tell us how it works and what inspired you to set that up.
Hi, John. Well, firstly, thanks very much for having me on. The inspiration for setting Provo up in the first place actually came from personal experience. I found myself setting up my own small business during the depths of the pandemic. And actually, I come from a corporate background. And what struck me really, really hard when doing this was that there's so many areas of running a small business where you can't be an expert. And you slightly have to make it up as you go along. And this obviously, creates quite a high level of risk, and the risk of getting it wrong can have quite big implications for your business along the line. So when I was doing this, I found myself reaching out to my network, and I was really overwhelmed by the levels of help and goodwill that I received. And what I realized through doing this was that actually a lot of the goodwill that we were all experiencing in everyday life, particularly during the pandemic, was now spilling over into the business world as well. The problem I had with that was that, the help I was getting was limited to my own network. And I guess, we all have our own, professional networks through social media. But very often the people that we're connected to will actually have quite similar skills and experience to our own, which is not necessarily what you need when you run your own small business. So I thought about this in the context of the sharing economy and saw, how it's changed how we travel and how we buy and ultimately, where we stay. And I thought, well, why couldn't the sharing economy be used to help businesses on a kind of B2B level as well? So what I decided to do was to create an environment where that business goodwill could be managed constructively across the board. Ultimately, I suppose, free professional peer-to-peer help, whenever you need it.
Okay, and a lot like networking sites, there's plenty of these sort of sites and forums sprouting up that allow businesses to post needs for skills and services, and to sort of put a call out for help. When you were setting up Provo, did you see there was real demand for these type of sites right now? Are they really essential to helping small businesses grow and develop?
Yeah, I think so. Small businesses drive the UK economy. So they're absolutely critical because cash flow often prevents small businesses from accessing the help that they need, and that ultimately risks their own success. And this isn't because they lack talent or drive. It's because no one can be an expert in everything it takes to start and run a small business. So I felt that, there are a lot of existing channels out there, but I personally felt that these often have big challenges themselves. There are a lot of forums out there where questions get posed on a business level, and these often get followed by multiple answers in the same thread, and these often kind of can become quite contradictory, and unfortunately, in some cases, they become confrontational, which is unfortunately the nature of social media. They also often become environments where businesses ultimately try and sell their products and services. And I think, as a small business owner, when you are a bit cash strapped, that's sort of not what you're looking for. What I found was that the most useful help I received was when it was on a one-to-one basis, where I was able to engage for a few minutes with someone who had the exact skills and experience I needed to answer the questions that I had. And so, what I wanted to do was create a much more sort of personalized environment where people could engage on a much more direct basis with each other.
Yeah, and I guess, sort of skills and service exchange sites often require someone to give something up in return for what they're receiving from somebody else. A small business is going to have to commit to giving up their own valuable time or services to leverage skills and services from others. How exactly does that work on Provo?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That idea of having to give up too much time is a challenge for any business. And so the idea of Provo is never to replace paid work, but it's to fill the gap where businesses need a few key pointers but don't have the cash flow to pay for it. And for if you're looking for someone to help you, an expert in whatever field the question you're asking, it just requires a couple of minutes of their time to make sure that the recipient is working along the right lines and not making simple but often very costly mistakes. So when I relate this back to Provo, how it works is anybody who's registered on the site, and it's a simple registration process, can post a question, and we call these question probit requests. And then anyone who thinks that they're well placed to help can post an answer, simple answer. But unlike many of the business forums out there, the answer doesn't immediately become public. As there may be more than one person who offers to answer, and then the recipient can choose who they feel is best placed to engage with, and either simply accept the answer, which can then be made public if they choose, or alternatively continue that conversation on a one-to-one basis through Provo's internal messenger system. Then at the end of the process, at the end of the conversation, members have a chance to rate the experience, which will then contribute to each user's overall profile, which will then be detailed on their own personal profile pages. And then others can use that information to decide whether they're the best person to engage with in the future. So, sort of taking it back a step, I think as a society, we're seeing a really dramatic increase in desire for people to give something back, ultimately by paying it forward across all aspects of life. So as well as providing users with, the vital help and expertise for their own businesses, what it's doing is it's enabling them the opportunity to do this to give it back in a truly meaningful way.
Thanks, Rupert. We've talked about small businesses helping one another through these sites, but what about the role of big businesses? Do they have a role to play here in helping smaller businesses to develop? How can smaller businesses leverage the experience of those that are bigger than them?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. Increasingly, larger businesses are making commitments within their CSR and ESG policies that they want to support small business. But I think the question is, what does this actually mean in practical terms, so that it's not just a sort of woolly commitment that doesn't mean anything? How do they keep it on an even playing field? And then ultimately, how do small businesses access this help? So our aim at Provo is to encourage larger businesses to work with us to provide members with certain levels of help and support across their own various departments. And that could be anything, finance, marketing, HR, IT, whatever. And in doing so, help them to fulfill their CSR commitments they've made in a really meaningful way, in a really tangible way. and in a way that can genuinely make a difference to the entrepreneurial and small business community.
Yeah, fantastic. And just finally on this, Rupert, how do you see this type of skills and services sharing activity playing out as we move forward? Is it the type of thing that's likely to grow in popularity? Will we see more of it?
I think it's absolutely inevitable that we will. We're currently in, and I think, entering more so into a really, really tough business environment. The high levels of inflation we're seeing at the moment, are potentially going to get higher. Margins are going to get tightened. And so it's inevitable that small businesses and SMEs are going to be looking increasingly for ways to make themselves more efficient without increasing costs. And I think, getting help from others is a way in which that's going to happen. But I think technology has also got a really big part to play here. Whereas in the past you might have had, let's say, for example, an HR specialist who set up their own consultancy but is in desperate need of a few hints and tips about the best way to grow their business. And then you might have, a business development specialist elsewhere who had exactly the skills they needed to help them, but it's unlikely they'd have ever had the opportunity to find each other. What Provo is doing is using that technology to get, alongside the sharing economy to make sure that those connections can happen and that small businesses can have, the best chances they need to succeed.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Rupert. And thanks, Kelly, as well, for that brilliant walk through how small businesses and the self-employed can harness advice, confidence and skills from networks and exchange sites. That was really interesting. Thank you also to our audience for listening. While I have your attention, I would just like to remind you that you can subscribe to the First Voice podcast to receive regular updates and guidance on the big issues affecting small businesses. And do please also remember that you can find a whole host of additional webinars, podcasts, and other content on the First Voice website at firstvoice.fsb.org.uk. Many thanks.